Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere cold. So cold that your eyelashes would freeze together before you even blinked. You're standing on the deck of a medieval pirate ship, the board slick with frost, the sea around you dark as spilled ink. The wind cuts through your coat like a knife, and you wonder how anyone could sleep out here, let alone dream. But they did. And tonight, you're going to find out how. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights and let's step into the story. You trudge across the frozen deck, each footstep giving off a small, sharp crunch. It's long past midnight, and the sea has gone strangely still. The kind of silence that only happens when even the wind has given up. The sails above hang like ghostly sheets, stiff with ice, creaking when the ship shifts. There's a faint glimmer from the lantern swinging near the mast, its light distorted by the cold fog curling up from the water. Your fingers are already numb, your breath puffing white against the black sky. Somewhere below deck, a man coughs wet and deep. Another mutters a prayer to St. Elmo, patron of sailors and lightning, though you can't tell whether it's gratitude or desperation. The smell of salt and tar mixes with something sour, unwashed wool maybe, or the last of a barrel gone bad. You look up at the rigging and imagine men climbing it even in weather like this, their hands bare, their boots slick, just to adjust the frozen lines. They'd sleep where they could, if they could. Pirates didn't have luxury cabins, not the kind you see in movies. Most slept wherever there was room to lie down without being trampled. Sometimes that meant between barrels, sometimes on top of coils of rope. And when the cold came, when winter seas turned savage, it meant trying to survive in conditions that would drive most modern sailors below deck, screaming for a hot shower. You rub your hands together, trying to feel your fingertips. The air tastes metallic, like old coins. Some nights the cold was so intense that metal buckles stuck to skin. Pirates, for all their swagger, didn't escape nature's cruelty. Ships from the 15th and 16th centuries weren't insulated. The decks leaked, the hulls groaned, and the only thing standing between a man and hypothermia was a threadbare blanket and the warmth of the crew packed like sardines. Historians still argue whether pirates deliberately avoided the North or simply had no choice when chasing trade routes. But one thing's certain, winter on a ship was merciless. The North Sea could turn to slush, the Baltic to glass. Ice formed on the rigging until it weighed down the masts. Men chipped at it with knives just to keep the sails from snapping. You pause near the bow, leaning over the rail. The sea below looks solid enough to walk on, a rolling plain of gray-blue ice shards. Somewhere beyond that horizon are ports frozen shut, fishermen stranded ashore, and the faint hope of warmth. The pirates aboard this ship didn't have that hope. Out here, the cold wasn't a visitor. It was a crew member. A fact often forgotten. Pirates weren't always from the tropics. The romantic Caribbean image came later. In medieval Europe, especially between the 13th and 16th centuries, pirates often roamed the North Atlantic, the English Channel, or the coasts of Scandinavia. They raided merchant ships from Hanseatic ports, or even the icy northern whaling routes. The term Viking had long faded, but its echoes lingered in the cold breath of men still living by plunder and sail. And here's a quirky tidbit to keep your imagination awake for a few minutes longer. Some of these pirates rubbed their hands with whale oil before sleep to trap heat under their skin. Whale oil, thick and greasy, worked like a primitive thermal layer. It smelled awful, of course, but when your bones ached from cold, vanity wasn't a concern. You can almost feel that slick residue now, mixed with salt and grime, catching what little warmth the body could produce. You step closer to a small wooden hatch leading below deck. The light spilling from it is faint and yellow, flickering like a heartbeat. Inside, the air will be different, warmer, perhaps, but suffocatingly so. The men down there will be huddled in clusters, wrapped in whatever cloth they could steal or stitch. Maybe one snores through missing teeth. Another dreams of gold he'll never spend. Sleep on a ship like this wasn't gentle. It was a negotiation between exhaustion and fear. The wind picks up again, whining low through the rigging. You pull your coat tighter, though it does little. Your mind wanders to how pirates measured comfort, not by softness, but by survival. A night where you didn't lose a toe to frostbite counted as luxury. A morning where the ship hadn't cracked its hull on floating ice felt like a blessing. The sea didn't care about their crimes or their courage. It just existed, cold and infinite, testing whoever dared cross it. You glance at the stars, faint pinpricks blurred by thin clouds. Somewhere above them, the same constellations have watched centuries of sailors struggle through nights just like this. Orion's belt, the North Star, familiar companions to men who had nothing else to rely on. The rhythmic creak of the mast becomes almost hypnotic, like a lullaby built from wood and wind. There's a beauty in it, too. If you squint through the misery, the frost along the rail sparkles faintly, catching the lantern light. The sea breathes in slow waves, steady, asleep itself. You think of the crew below, each one a story, some murderers, some runaways, some just desperate. Tonight they share the same enemy, the cold. Tomorrow perhaps they'll return to killing, but for now they just want to keep breathing. You run your hand over the deck rail and feel the thin crust of ice flake beneath your palm. It's rough, real. For all its danger, the ship is alive, groaning like a living thing under stress. Somewhere a rope snaps and someone curses softly. The sound fades quickly into the night, swallowed by the wind. The historians who write about these ships often focus on the battles, the treasures, the flags. But the truth, the small human truth, lives in these frozen nights, in how they slept with their boots on because undressing meant death, in how one man's blanket might be stolen the moment he drifted off, in how sometimes they sang quietly into the dark, their voices trembling but steady to remind themselves they were still there. You feel the ship roll beneath your feet, gentle but insistent. Somewhere deep in the hold, barrels shift and chains rattle. You can almost hear the ghosts of all who came before, sailors, raiders, dreamers, each one leaving behind a breath of warmth in the endless cold. And as you stand there under the brittle sky, you realize this story isn't about treasure or glory. It's about survival, the most ancient, fragile kind, the kind that happens one shivering night at a time, when all you can do is hold on to the creaking wood beneath you and hope the sea doesn't notice you tonight.
A tired, defeated old man, the ship groans beneath your feet as you shift your weight. The boards flexing just enough to remind you that this entire world of wooden rope is floating on an endless, merciless sea. The air feels colder now, a steady wind slicing through the rigging. You can hear the sound of ropes straining and timbers answering in low, aching voices. Every creak and pop feels alive, as if the ship itself is trying to talk to you. You move slowly, feeling your way along the icy railing. The moonlight spills in thin silver bands across the deck, catching the frost that glitters like powdered glass. Every breath you take rises in a pale cloud before fading into the night. The sails are stiff, heavy with ice, their canvas edges frozen into strange rippling shapes that look more like sculptures than fabric. You pause for a moment and listen. The ocean has gone quiet, except for the faint hiss of small waves lapping against the hull. Somewhere nearby, a loose rope bangs rhythmically against the mast. That sound could drive a man mad after enough sleepless nights. You picture the pirates trying to sleep with that steady knocking mixed with the groaning of the planks and the occasional scream of the wind through the rigging. Sleep was a battle they fought every night, not with swords, but with sound. The upper deck is deserted. Most of the crew have already vanished below to escape the wind. You can almost see their shadows moving down there, cramped together in a space that smells of salt, sweat, and mold. A lantern swings just above the hatch, its light golden but weak, painting the air with slow-moving halos. You reach out to steady it, and your fingers brush the metal handle. The cold burns your skin, so you pull back quickly. Every surface on this ship bites, even the ropes, stiff with frozen salt, cut your palms if you grip too tightly. It is easy to understand why some men refuse to climb the rigging in winter. A single slip on the ice could send them overboard, vanishing into the black water before anyone even noticed. There is a small fact that might surprise you. Medieval ships were never quiet, not even in still weather. The constant flexing of wood, the rhythm of waves slapping the hull, the wind thrumming in the ropes, all of it created a living symphony that never stopped. It was the ocean's version of white noise, only sharper, harsher, and laced with danger. Pirates grew used to it. Many could not sleep on land afterward, unable to rest without that chorus of creaks and sighs. And then there is the smell. Every ship carried its own perfume of survival. You can imagine it now. The heavy scent of tar, the sourness of unwashed clothes, and the faint sweetness of stale rum, and something darker beneath it all, like rot or damp wool. It was the smell of confinement and endurance, the scent of men who could not escape their own ship even if they wanted to. You walk toward the bow, the wood beneath your boots slick and shining. The railing is coated in rime, each line of ice catching the light like crystal veins. Somewhere deep inside the hull, the sound of snoring rises and falls. It is strange, almost peaceful, that anyone could sleep through this. Yet they did. They had to. A man who could not sleep at sea would lose his mind within weeks. The reality check comes quietly. Most of these pirates would never live long enough to grow old. Disease, cold, starvation, and battle took them young. You probably wouldn't survive this week, let alone the winter. The air alone could break your spirit. But here they are, finding rest between storms, wrapped in threadbare blankets or curled in corners where the wind does not reach.
A quirky fact that always fascinates historians is that pirates often slept near their weapons. Cutlasses, pistols, and daggers were kept within arm's reach even while dreaming. It was not paranoia, it was practicality. On a ship filled with thieves and killers, the line between sleep and death was thin. Some men even tied their weapons to their belts before lying down, so no one could steal them. Imagine the clinking of metal as they turned over, the dull thud of a pistol sliding against the planks. You crouch and rest a hand against the deck, feeling the faint vibration of waves beneath. There is a rhythm to it, slow and deep, like the heartbeat of something ancient. The ship talks to you through those shutters, whispering its age and its burden. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the wind, the wood, the soft murmur of life below deck. Historians still debate whether pirates preferred to sleep above deck or below during the coldest voyages. Some argue that staying below offered warmth from the bodies of other men and the ship's enclosed air. Others claim that the lower decks were so foul, damp, and airless that men would rather risk frostbite under the stars. Both might be true. You can picture it. One man wrapped in wool below, sweating from the stench, another curled under the open sky, shivering but breathing fresh air. The lantern light flickers again. You lean against the mast and feel its steady pulse, the wood shifting with every roll of the ship. It feels alive beneath your shoulder, like an old animal breathing in its sleep. The ropes hanging nearby knock together softly, a steady beat in the quiet night. The world has shrunk to the ship, the sea, and the sound of the cold. The horizon is gone, the stars dulled by drifting clouds. You can almost forget there is land anywhere at all. Out here, the pirates were trapped between two infinities, the frozen sky above and the endless water below. Their only real home was the fragile planks between them. You take one last slow look around. The deck is a map of frost and moonlight. Every line, every nail, every frozen puddle tells a story of human stubbornness. The men below are sleeping, if you can call it that, while their ship whispers and groans around them. And you, standing here with your breath hanging in the air, can almost feel what they felt, the uneasy peace between exhaustion and fear, the strange beauty of surviving just one more night. You open your eyes again and watch the shadows move. For a moment, you forget the cold, the danger, the history. You just see motion and rest, life and sleep, all swaying gently together under the weight of the sea. You duck lower into the ship's belly, careful not to hit your head against the low beams. The space narrows as you move forward, the air growing thicker with each step. It feels warmer here, but not in a pleasant way. The heat is stale, trapped beneath the planks, mingled with the smell of salt, smoke, and human breath. Your boots stick slightly to the damp floorboards, slick with condensation that drips from above. The dim light barely reaches the corners. A single lantern swings from a hook, its flame struggling against the drafts that slip through the seams. The glow trembles over sleeping bodies and open barrels. Every object casts a wavering shadow that seems alive. You can hear quiet snores, the rustle of fabric, and the occasional clink of metal when someone shifts and a blade taps against wood. The walls here are lined with rough boards, patched where leaks once were. The hull creaks with every swell, and a drop of icy water lands on your neck. You shiver. This was where pirates truly lived at sea, not on open decks under moonlight, but in the damp gloom below, half buried in ropes, barrels, and bodies. It is written in the journals of sailors from the late Middle Ages that the lower deck was both haven and prison. Up above, the wind could kill you with frost. Down here, the air might choke you first. Yet most men preferred it. Even foul air felt kinder than the bite of open sky. A peculiar truth about life below deck was how every sound echoed. A man coughing in the corner could be heard across the room. Conversations turned into whispers, and whispers often into secrets. Here, alliances were formed, grudges brewed, and stories told between breaths. The cold may have ruled the sea, but down here, warmth came from company. You crouch near a pile of tattered blankets. The fabric is coarse, patched from different materials, some wool, some linen, some so thin you can see through them. The smell rising from them is heavy and earthy. You imagine 2 or 3 men sharing one, wrapped together in exhausted silence. In one corner, you notice a small figure, perhaps a boy, no older than 15, huddled with his knees to his chest, his back against a barrel. The pirates kept young hands on board to do the dirtiest work, cleaning decks, running messages, patching leaks. Many never saw land again. For them, the lower deck was bedroom, classroom, and nightmare all in one. You step closer to the hull and press your hand against it. The wood feels alive, cold, and damp, but pulsing faintly with the movement of the waves outside. You feel every vibration as the ship rocks. It is hard to imagine sleeping through that endless sway. Yet the men here did so every night. Sleep for them was not about comfort, but escape. Accounts from explorers of the same era suggest that crews often divided the hold into crude sleeping areas with ropes or hanging cloth. It gave the illusion of privacy, though no one was ever truly alone. A cough or cry would break through the thin barriers. Some even carved small charms into the beams near their hammocks, hoping for protection from the sea. A strangely touching practice is noted in a few surviving ship logs. When the weather was at its worst, some pirates would keep a small ember in a covered bowl of sand, shielding it like treasure. The ember would glow faintly through the night, a fragile promise of warmth. They called it the heart of the ship. If it went out, men said bad luck was coming. Researchers today still cannot decide whether this ritual was widespread or confined to a few desperate crews. The evidence is fragmentary, half folklore and half fact. But even imagining it, you can see the meaning clearly. In the blackness of the ship's belly, a single red ember must have felt like life itself. You look around and think of the stories that must have been told in this space. Men bragging about raids gone right, whispering of storms that almost swallowed them whole. Others remembering homes they would never see again. The voices must have blended with the creaks and drips, weaving the ship's own kind of music. The air grows heavier as you linger. You begin to notice the layers of sound that fill the space, the rhythmic thump of waves against the hull, the faint weave of the wind through the cracks, the quiet groans of sleepers turning in their hammocks. All of it mixes into a pulse that feels oddly comforting. The ship breathes with them, its lungs filled with salt and human dreams. You kneel beside one hammock and study its occupant. A man with a tangled beard, his face half buried in rough cloth, one arm hanging loose toward the floor. His hand twitches as though still gripping a rope or sword. Even in sleep, he cannot let go of his work. The sea never allows that kind of surrender. For a moment, you close your eyes and try to imagine sleeping here. The heat pressing down, the stink of mold and sweat, the wooden walls sighing with every swell. Yet amid that discomfort, there is also something gentle. The sway of the ship rocks you without asking permission, a cradle carved from hardship. One forgotten sailor once wrote in a marginal note that below the deck, the ship holds her breath. You feel that truth now. The air is thick but quiet, as though the whole vessel pauses while its crew sleeps. Above, the cold night howls down. Here in this dim cocoon, the men find fragile peace before dawn wakes the waves again. You pull yourself back toward the main deck again, where a faint glimmer of morning light slips through the cracks in the planks. The cold air greets you immediately, biting into your cheeks. You can smell the ocean again, sharp and clean, mixed with the tang of old salt and damp rope. The sky is the color of steel, and you feel the first whisper of snow in the wind. The crew begins to stir. One man stretches, another coughs, his breath forming small clouds. You notice how they are dressed. Nothing looks uniform. Their layers are a mix of whatever fabric they could steal, trade, or patch together. The sight tells a quiet story about survival. Documents from the 15th century mention that sailors often wore wool next to the skin, then linen, then heavy coats made of canvas or hide. Pirates copied this habit, wrapping themselves in whatever could trap warmth. Some even wore women's skirts or priests' robes, stolen from raids, torn and resewn into cloaks. It did not matter how it looked. Warmth was worth more than pride. You watch as one pirate adjusts a scarf made of bright red fabric, its edges frayed but thick. He ties it twice around his neck and tucks it under his chin, muttering something about keeping the devil's fingers off his throat. A curious superstition, perhaps. Sailors believed the cold carried spirits that could crawl into a man's lungs while he slept. A scarf was more than comfort, it was protection. The wind grows stronger, snapping the stiff sails. You pull your coat tighter. Even from here you can feel the frost forming on the ropes, the way it stiffens every knot. The men rub their hands together and stomp their feet, trying to coax warmth back into their limbs. One laughs bitterly and says, "The sea steals heat faster than it steals gold." It is written in old merchant records that winter voyages were a test of endurance more than navigation. The sea froze, sails stiffened, and men died not from storms, but from slow, creeping cold. Some crews packed extra blankets, but most simply layered everything they owned. When that failed, they stuffed their clothes with moss, straw, or shredded cloth from torn sails, anything to stop the wind from biting the skin. A small but fascinating practice from northern pirate crews involved rubbing seal fat on their faces and hands before nightfall. It worked like primitive insulation, trapping body heat and keeping moisture from freezing the skin. The smell must have been horrendous, thick and fishy, but those who used it swore it saved their fingers. You can almost smell it now. That pungent mix of oil and salt carried on the breeze. The cold is not just a sensation here, it is a presence. It seeps into everything, from the wood of the ship to the bones of the men. You notice how their movements grow slower, more deliberate, as if conserving energy with every step. There is no fire on deck, only the faint warmth of bodies working side by side. Scholars remain divided on whether pirates in northern waters carried extra furs from their raids or relied solely on stolen naval supplies. Some argue that plundered ships provided coats from soldiers and merchants alike, while others claim pirates lived too chaotically to stockpile clothing at all. The truth likely changes from ship to ship. What is clear is that no one faced the cold unprepared twice. You crouch to study the deckboards. Frost has crept into the grain, turning the wood white in patches. Your breath rises and vanishes instantly. You think about how the pirates must have felt waking up here each morning, shaking out frozen hammocks, pulling on boots that had turned hard as stone overnight. Some must have cursed the sea. Others laughed at it, knowing complaint would not make it warmer. It is easy to forget that most ships of this time had no insulation at all. The planks were thin, sealed only by pitch and tar, which cracked in deep cold. Every gust of wind slipped through the seams. Every drop of seawater turned to ice within minutes. If a man's clothes got wet, he had to strip them off and beat them against the mast until the ice cracked. Otherwise, he might freeze where he stood. You can almost feel the stiff fabric between your hands, rough and cold, edges cutting your skin as you try to soften it again. The ship becomes a wardrobe of frozen cloth, hanging limp and brittle like the skin of some enormous creature. A seagull cries overhead, its voice sharp against the silence. The pirates look up instinctively. One of them jokes that the bird must be lost, that even gulls avoid this kind of winter. Laughter spreads in short bursts, warm for a moment before fading back into quiet. Humor is one of the few comforts left to them. You take another slow look around. Every man is wrapped differently, one in patched wool, another in layers of sailcloth, another in something that might once have been a tapestry. The variety makes them look less like a crew and more like a band of ghosts draped in whatever remnants the world had forgotten. There is something oddly beautiful about it. The colors, though faded, catch the light, muted reds, browns, and grays. The wind pulls at their clothes, setting the edges fluttering. The scene looks almost painterly, as if frozen in time. And then a sharp sound breaks the calm, a crack, quick and loud, like glass shattering. A rope has snapped somewhere above, and the pirates look up. One curses under his breath. They move quickly, still sluggish from sleep, but their instincts sharp. The cold makes every task harder, every motion slower. You can see their breath like smoke trails weaving through the air as they work. When the rope is fixed, the ship settles again into its rhythm. The sea murmurs against the hull. One man yawns and wraps his cloak tighter, muttering something about the cold creeping through his dreams. You know what he means. Out here, the cold does not wait for you to fall asleep. It finds its way into your thoughts first. As you watch them work, you begin to understand that their layered clothes are more than protection. They're armor against both nature and despair. Each scrap of fabric, each patch sewn by tired fingers, tells the story of men who refused to surrender to the sea's indifference. And so they move, wrapped in their mismatched layers, their breath rising like faint ghosts in the pale morning. Above them, the frozen sails crack softly as the wind stirs again, and the ship continues on, carrying its shivering legends across an unforgiving horizon.
You follow the scent of smoke and ash toward the galley, the small space where pirates cooked, argued, and sometimes tried to stay warm. The passage narrows as you move, your boots thudding softly against the boards. The air feels heavier here, carrying the faint odor of burnt fat and tar. Somewhere close, metal clinks against metal. You can almost taste the iron in the air. Inside the galley, the light is dim,
shaped by a single oil lamp that swings slowly from a chain. The glow paints the walls in trembling amber. You notice the small blackened hearth built from stones and reinforced with iron plates. A few embers glow faintly at its heart, but there is no open flame. Pirates knew better than to risk that. Records from early naval expeditions make it clear that fire on a wooden ship was every sailor's nightmare. One spark could turn the vessel into an inferno before anyone reached water. Pirates had to choose between freezing or suffocating in smoke. Most of the time, they chose the cold. You crouch near the hearth, watching the tiny glow pulse. The air smells of wet wood, boiled salt beef, and smoke trapped for days. The pirates gather around it like moths. Some stretch their hands close, careful not to touch the iron. Their fingers are cracked and raw from cold. A few hold tin cups filled with rum that they sip slowly, their eyes fixed on the embers as if praying they will not die out. Here's a small but curious detail from ship logs. To create warmth without open fire, crews often filled iron pots with heated stones or sand. They would seal the top with cloth and carry these makeshift heaters below deck. The warmth lasted for hours, just enough to thaw stiff fingers or melt ice on ropes. You can almost imagine it now. The greasy texture mixed with salt and blood, helping them cling to life a few minutes longer. The wind howls faintly above, pressing through every crack. The lamp flickers, throwing long shadows that dance across the walls. The pirates are quiet, moving slowly. One scrapes the last bits of food from a pan. Another wipes his knife on his sleeve and mutters about the cold settling into his bones. They talk about warmth as if it were treasure. Modern researchers still cannot agree how crews managed heat during deep winter voyages. Some claim they built small shielded braziers that burned in the open air when the sea was calm. Others believe they used sealed lanterns filled with whale oil. Their faint heat multiplied by layers of wool and bodies packed close together. Whatever the truth, it was a dangerous balance. One wrong move could mean death by fire or frost. You sit beside them in the dim light. The glow from the coals breathes like a living thing. Every few seconds, one pirate leans forward with a stick to stir the ashes, coaxing more life from the heat. The room feels smaller when the warmth returns, as though the air itself softens. For a moment, everyone relaxes, shoulders dropping, eyes half closing. Then someone laughs softly, breaking the silence. He points at a dented copper kettle hanging from a hook. The handle has been wrapped with rope, and a small wooden carving dangles from it. It's a charm, a small promise that the ship will not burn. The men grin and tap it before turning back to their work. A sailor's life was full of such tokens. They carried pieces of bone, bits of shell, or carvings from driftwood, each with its own story. These were not luxuries. They were faith in solid form. When the world around you was made of ice and salt, even superstition had weight. You feel the ship tilt slightly beneath your feet. A few drops of hot water spill from a pot and hiss when they hit the cold floor. The pirates curse quietly, moving to steady the pans. One of them jokes that the ship must be jealous of the warmth. Laughter ripples again, short but genuine. It feels like a small victory, proof that spirits still burn even when fire cannot. Outside, the wind begins to rise. You can hear the sails strain and the ropes hum under tension. The sound creeps down through the wood, a reminder that the cold is always waiting just beyond the walls. The pirates glance toward the ceiling instinctively. The sea is never far away. A fascinating account from a 14th century voyage mentions that sailors sometimes used heated cannonballs to warm their quarters. They would take one from the galley fire, roll it across the deck in a bucket of sand, and then place it in a metal box to radiate heat. The risk was immense, yet the reward was a few hours of bearable cold. It is hard to say whether pirates truly dared it, but the idea alone shows the lengths they went to for survival. You imagine that glow, faint and red, flickering across the faces of exhausted men. The light catches on scars and beards, in eyes dulled by fatigue. They lean closer, chasing warmth that never lasts. The air smells of smoke, sweat, and old rum. The noise of the ship fades into the background until only the slow crackle of the coals remains. It is easy to see how the act of keeping a fire alive, however small, became something sacred. It was the ship's heartbeat, a pulse of light against the dark. A sailor would sit awake long after the others had fallen asleep, tending that fragile heat as though guarding life itself. You lean back, listening to the faint music of the sea against the hull. Above, the wind continues to sing. The pirates stretch out, their shoulders glowing faintly in the light, their breath misting in the air. For a brief moment, the room feels almost human, almost safe. Then the lamp flickers, and the cold slips back in, quiet but patient. The warmth fades quickly, leaving only the smell of ashes and salt. You can feel the change in the air, the reminder that no comfort lasts long out here. But in this fleeting moment, as the embers glow and the men's eyes grow heavy, the cold seems far away. The ship sighs again, and somewhere deep inside it, a small glowing coal keeps breathing. You climb back toward the middeck, where the light is thin and blue, a sign that the day is beginning, but the sun has not yet conquered the mist. The air feels brittle, as if it might shatter if you breathe too sharply. Above you, the rigging hums with the wind. The sails strain, and you hear the creak of wood moving in slow rhythm. It is not the sound of chaos, but of duty. The ship never sleeps, not even when the crew tries to. The rotation of the night watches dictates the rhythm of everyone's life here. Pirates, like naval crews, divided their time into shifts called watches. Some men kept guard while others rested, and every few hours the bell would ring to switch them. It was the only clock they truly trusted. You imagined a tone of that bell, dull and distant, cutting through dreams like a whisper from the sea itself. Historical records from early privateers describe these watch rotations as both discipline and curse. Too much rest meant danger, too little meant madness. Pirates, never fond of order, often bent the schedule to fit their moods or needs. Some slept 2 hours at a time. Others refused sleep entirely until exhaustion forced them down. What mattered was not the number of hours, but the rhythm itself, the pulse of ship life that never stopped. You lean on the railing, feeling it cold beneath your palms. The horizon glows faintly. A few men shuffle out from below deck, eyes blurry, hair matted with frost. One yawns so hard you hear his jaw crack. Another splashes a handful of seawater on his face, gasps and laughs at the shock of it. Their voices sound hoarse, yet alive. The next watch has begun. A fascinating note from a 16th century sailor's diary reveals that men on watch used music to keep themselves awake. Not the kind you might expect, but low humming, rhythmic stamping, or the tapping of spoons on barrels. It kept time with the rocking of the ship. You can almost hear it now, a slow, murmuring percussion that floats across the deck like a heartbeat. The man at the wheel grips it tight, his fingers red and cracked. The ship tilts slightly as he adjusts the course. Beside him, another man peers into the mist, watching for shapes that could mean ice or enemy sails. Neither speaks. They do not need to. Out here, silence is its own language. There is something meditative about the way they move, as if the body learns to follow the rhythm of the ocean. You begin to understand why so many sailors describe the sea as both torment and teacher. The motion seeps into the bones, and even in sleep, the body rocks as if still at work. It is said that men who return to land often swayed unconsciously for days, their bodies still trying to balance on invisible waves. Not every watch is peaceful. Sometimes the darkness hides more than waves. One man glances over his shoulder, often checking shadows as though expecting something to climb from the sea. You remember hearing that sailors once believed in creatures that followed ships, waiting for the moment a man fell overboard. The fear of being alone in the dark ocean was more terrible than battle itself. The rotation continues. The men who just finished their shift stumble below deck, their faces gray with fatigue. One of them rubs his chest as though trying to chase away the chill that never leaves. They will sleep now if the noise and cold allow it, until the next bell wakes them again. Experts today still discuss how much rest pirates truly managed at sea. Some estimates suggest they slept less than 4 hours a day during long voyages. Others believe the chaos of pirate life allowed longer naps between raids, a luxury no navy could afford. The truth lies somewhere between exhaustion and necessity. You step closer to the main mast where a lantern hangs. The flame flickers weakly, but its light spreads across the deck, illuminating the frost clinging to ropes and railings. You run your fingers along one of the ropes, feeling the stiff salt crust that forms overnight. It crunches slightly beneath your touch. Everything here is touched by the sea, even the smallest fibers. One of the pirates on watch begins to whistle softly, a slow tune that sounds more like mourning than music. The others glance his way, but do not stop him. The sound drifts through the air, curling around the masts and fading into the distance. It fills the silence without breaking it. In this rhythm, the ship becomes a living organism. Each man is a cell, each watch a heartbeat. When one part fails, the rest must carry on. That understanding binds them more tightly than any code of loyalty. The ocean teaches unity through fear. A curious little tradition from some crews involved the passing of a token during watch changes. It might be a carved bead, a button, or a scrap of rope, symbolizing the weight of responsibility. The man beginning his shift would hold it briefly, whisper something only he could hear, then tie it to his wrist. To drop or lose it was considered bad luck. You picture rough hands exchanging that tiny object in the freezing air, a simple act that carried enormous meaning. The sky brightens slightly, a faint promise of day. The sea remains dark, though it glitters where iceberg floats by. You watch as the pirates scan the horizon, their eyes narrowed against the wind. Sleep still clings to their faces, but alertness returns, slow and steady. The bell rings again, a hollow sound swallowed by the mist. Another rotation begins, another trade between sleep and duty. You realize that this rhythm never stops, not for weather, not for exhaustion, not even for fear. The ship's life depends on it. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sound of the bell echo through your chest. It is not a harsh sound anymore. It feels like breathing, constant and calm, an anchor against the chaos of the sea. The pirates live and sleep by that rhythm, and in a strange way, so do you now. The next evening, the cold grows deeper, and the air feels heavy enough to drink. The sky is bruised with purple clouds, and the waves have slowed to a thick, sluggish roll. The ship moves like a tired animal through the water. Lanterns swing lazily, and the pirates gather close, their faces shadowed and pale. Tonight, rum will be the only warmth that reaches them. The smell hits you first, sweet, sharp, and earthy, a mix of molasses and smoke. Someone passes a flask along the line, taking turns without a word. The rum burns the throat, but it also blurs the cold, makes the edges of the night softer. One man sighs with relief after his drink, as if he can finally feel his heart again. Historical journals often mention that rum was both comfort and curse aboard ships of this age. The strong liquor numbed pain, quieted fear, and filled empty bellies when food shortened. But it also dulled reflexes, frayed tempers, and fueled fights that could end with blood on the planks. Pirates, unlike naval crews, had no rations to control their drinking. A cask might last a week or a night, depending on their mood and misery. You sit near the group, listening to their talk. The sound of their laughter carries easily in the still air, low and rough. Their stories wander between truth and imagination, stitched together by the rhythm of their cups. One speaks of a raid near the Canary Islands, where they drank more than they fought. Another swears he once saw frost form on a man's beard, so thick it broke when he smiled. Here's an odd little truth drawn from sailors' accounts. Some crews mixed rum with seawater, both to stretch it and to avoid the shock of drinking it neat in the cold. They called it grog, a word that would later drift into naval tradition. The salt made it worse for thirst, but easier on frozen throats. You can almost taste it, sharp and briny, as if the ocean itself were in the cup. The light from the lantern catches the surface of a bottle, making it glow amber in the dark. The pirates watch it the way men on land might watch a fireplace. The rum becomes a substitute for heat, a trick for the body as much as for the mind. The wind moans softly through the rigging. One pirate begins to hum.
A tired, defeated old man. Others join in, the melody slow and uncertain, a lullaby stitched from exhaustion. It is not a song of victory or hope, but something older, something that belongs to the sea. You can feel it in your chest, that strange calm that comes after too much drink and too little sleep. Experts continue to discuss whether alcohol actually helped sailors survive cold voyages. Some argue that it only gave the illusion of warmth, drawing heat from the body faster once the buzz faded. Others suggest that in small doses it offered real comfort, enough to keep despair from sinking too deep. What no one doubts is its power over morale. A warm drink, even a dangerous one, kept men alive in spirit, if not in body. You watch as one pirate wipes his mouth and grins through cracked lips. His teeth are yellow, his cheeks hollow.
He taps the bottle against the mast and says, "To the cold, may it drink slower than we do." The others laugh, though it is the kind of laughter that hides something brittle underneath. The ship rolls gently, and the lantern light ripples across the deck. A few men lean back against barrels, eyes half closed. Their words blur into mumbling. Rum has a way of making time slip sideways. Minutes stretch into hours without anyone noticing. The rhythm of the sea and the buzz of alcohol melt together until even the cold feels far away. But the peace never lasts long. A shout breaks from the other end of the deck, harsh and slurred. Two men argue over a cup. The sound rises quickly, sharp against the night. One pushes the other, and the crew moves fast to pull them apart. Their hands grip shoulders, voices low, trying not to wake the rest of the ship. The fight fizzles as quickly as it began, leaving only a tense silence. A curious superstition floats among sailors' tales. It was said that a spilling rum at sea angered the spirits of drowned men. The liquid belonged to them once it touched the deck. That is why some pirates, after a brawl, would pour a few drops over the side to pay the sea. You watch one of them do it now, tilting the bottle slightly and whispering into the dark water. The wind carries the smell of rum across the deck, mixing with the salt air. Somewhere below, a few men stir in their hammocks, muttering in their sleep. Maybe they are dreaming of taverns, firelight, and soft beds. Maybe they dream of warmth that never ends. You can almost see it through their eyes, a wooden table, candles dripping wax, laughter echoing without fear of frost. The bottle comes back around to you. You lift it to your lips. The taste is harsh but alive. It burns for a moment, then fades, leaving behind the strange comfort of something shared. The cold is still here, pressing at your face, creeping into your fingers, but it feels softer now, as if it has agreed to wait its turn. Above you, the sails snap once, and the ship tilts gently. The rum settles in your stomach like a small ember, not enough to chase the cold away, but enough to remind you you're still here. Around you, the pirates laugh again, their voices slow and rough, and for a fleeting hour, the coldest night at sea feels almost human. The rum is gone by dawn, leaving the air thick with the smell of salt, smoke, and tired laughter. The pirates have gone quiet again, their voices fading into whispers as the cold returns. You watch them settle into their corners, pulling their blankets close, their eyelids heavy but restless. Sleep comes differently at sea. It is not rest so much as retreat, a thin layer between exhaustion and memory. You lean against a wooden beam, feeling the ship move under you. It sways gently, like breathing around you. The men drift into uneasy slumber, their faces soften, their bodies curling inward. The sound of the sea blends with their slow, uneven breathing. Somewhere above, the ropes knock softly against the mast, a rhythm that feels almost deliberate, almost kind. It is written in the letters of captured sailors that pirates often dreamed of land. They spoke of beaches, fires, and soft beds as if they were miracles. Some claimed to see gold even in their sleep, coins spilling from invisible chests, only to vanish when they reached for them. You imagine the frustration of that. The longing turned into nightmare. The colder the sea, the sweeter the dream. A curious glimpse into pirate superstition appears in an old ballad. It was said that a man who dreamed of fire during winter would not live to see spring. Flames in dreams were omens of fever, storms, or battle. The men joked about it sometimes, but you can sense that they half believed it. When warmth is a luxury, even imagined fire becomes dangerous. You watch as one man turns in his hammock, mumbling softly. His lips form the shape of a word that sounds like home. He is probably from somewhere green, somewhere with trees and smoke curling from a hearth. The others shift, grunting or sighing, tangled in their hammocks like fish caught in nets. The ship rocks, and the hammocks sway in answer. It looks almost peaceful. From a historian's point of view, dreams were one of the few escapes available to sailors. Diaries from the 15th century mention recurring visions among crews who spent too long at sea. They dreamed of soundless lands, of walking on solid ground that never moved, of hearing birds instead of waves. For pirates, whose lives were built on danger and constant movement, these dreams might have felt like heaven. You close your eyes for a moment and try to imagine their inner world. The smell of the ocean seeps even into dreams. The motion of the ship never truly fades. Even in sleep, the sea remains. You might find yourself walking through a market, yet the ground tilts beneath your feet. You might see a face from childhood, only for it to dissolve into the shape of a wave. The mind, it seems, never lets go of the ocean once it takes hold. Experts today still discuss whether the isolation of long voyages caused shared hallucinations among sailors. Some say the monotony and malnutrition warped their perception of reality. Others believe that the endless rhythm of waves acted like hypnosis, pulling their minds into a state between waking and dreaming. Whatever the cause, the sea had a way of invading their sleep. The pirates around you shift again. A man laughs softly in his dream. Another curses. Somewhere, someone snores so loudly that a few others chuckle in their sleep before falling still. The warmth of their bodies fills the air with a faint mist. The lantern light flickers across the ceiling, throwing gentle waves of gold that rise and fall with the ship's motion. You remember that many pirates were once ordinary sailors, merchants or fishermen, who had known land well before the sea claimed them. Perhaps their dreams were fragments of that other life still echoing in the dark. A house by a harbor, a woman's voice, the smell of bread. For all their roughness, pirates were human first, and the night reminded them of it. One fascinating account from a prisoner's testimony describes a pirate who refused to sleep below deck, saying he could not bear to dream of dry land. He slept on the open deck instead, wrapped in sailcloth, his face to the stars. The others mocked him, calling him ghost lover, but he said it helped him remember he was free. The testimony ends with his disappearance at sea a few weeks later. You listen now to the sea outside. It whispers against the hull like a voice too distant to understand. It sounds almost tender. Perhaps that is why pirates came to love and hate it equally. It took their freedom and their peace, gave them riches and death in the same breath. In their dreams they might have tried to make peace with it, to tame it for a few hours before waking. A small, almost forgotten detail from a ship's log mentions that some crews encouraged storytelling before sleep. It was a way to guide dreams, to shape what the mind would see. The stories were simple, sometimes about gold, sometimes about food, but they worked. Men slept better after imagining something worth surviving for. You can feel that rhythm in the room now, the murmured breathing, the creak of hammocks, the sigh of the sea. It feels ancient, almost sacred. The dreams drifting through this ship are not peaceful, but they are alive. They carry warmth that no fire can give, the warmth of memory, of something human still glowing beneath the cold. You look up. The lantern light dances across the beams, and for a fleeting moment you imagine the ship dreaming with them. Its creaks are whispers, its sway a heartbeat. Maybe even the wood remembers the warmth of the sun, long gone. And as you stand there, surrounded by sleeping men and their fragile dreams, the cold outside feels less cruel.
The next day begins with dull gray light, heavy clouds hiding the horizon. The cold bites even before you open your eyes fully. The ship groans softly under your feet, every timber stiff from frost. The smell of salted meat lingers in the air, and somewhere nearby a pan clatters. It is time for the morning meal, though calling it that feels generous. You follow the sound into the galley. A few men gather around a small table, heads bowed, hands cupped around tin plates. The food looks as tired as they do. Hardtack biscuits chipped like stone, strips of salted beef that glisten with oil, and a pot of gray stew that smells faintly of brine and smoke. The air feels damp and close, filled with the aroma of boiled fat and wet wool. Old seafaring records tell us that pirates, like other sailors of their time, survived on rations meant to last months. The meat was packed in barrels of salt, so strong that men often had to soak it overnight before cooking. Bread turned to rock within weeks. If a biscuit broke your tooth, no one was surprised. They called it ship's bread, though it was closer to punishment. You watch one man try to chew through a piece of beef, his jaw working slowly. He grunts, swallows, then laughs without humor. "Better than snow," he mutters. Another scoops stew into a tin cup, the liquid pale and thin. You can smell the salt from where you stand. A curious little detail from ship life reveals that some pirates used their rum to soften the hardtack. They would soak the biscuits until they crumbled, then mix them with sugar or molasses if they had any. It turned into a kind of porridge, sweet and thick, a rare comfort in the biting cold. You can almost taste it now, sweet and bitter at once, the warmth spreading just enough to remind you what comfort feels like. The cook stirs his pot with a wooden ladle, his hands red from cold. He hums softly under his breath, an old song from some port you will never see. The melody winds through the air, mingling with the clink of spoons and the creak of the ship. The pirates eat in silence, the kind born of exhaustion rather than manners. There are no fresh vegetables, no fruit, no bread that still bends. The men's lips are cracked, their faces pale. Some show the first signs of scurvy, bleeding gums, slow movements, eyes dull with fatigue. The sea takes its toll slowly, without mercy. They chew, swallow, and stare at nothing. The act of eating feels more like survival than satisfaction. Researchers have found records of inventive cooks who tried to keep spirits up with strange recipes. Some mixed crushed biscuits with seawater and grease to make something like dumplings. Others used powdered mustard to hide the taste of rot. It was creativity born of desperation. Pirates were not chefs, but they were stubborn. Anything edible became a meal. The man beside you holds out a plate of stew and gestures for you to sit. You take it, feeling the warmth seep into your fingers through the metal. The broth tastes of salt and smoke, thin but alive. You can feel it travel down your throat, warming a little piece of you the cold had forgotten. Around you, spoons scrape plates. For a few minutes, the only sound is eating. An argument begins at the far end of the table. Two men grumble over who gets the last bit of dried fruit. Their voices rise, but no one else interferes. Hunger sharpens tempers more than rum ever could.
Finally, the cook slams his ladle against the pot, and the noise echoes through the galley. The fight stops. The silence that follows is heavy, but short-lived. The rhythm of eating resumes, slower now, quieter. A strange fact from a 14th century travel account mentions that sailors sometimes kept small cloth bags filled with aromatic herbs or citrus peel when available. They would sniff these during meals to mask the stench of spoiled food. You picture a pirate lifting such a charm to his nose while pretending the stew in front of him tastes like roasted lamb. It is both ridiculous and deeply human. The air thickens with the smell of smoke as the last coals in the hearth fade. Someone coughs, someone else belches, then laughs. The sound ripples through the room like a spark. It reminds everyone that they are still alive, still together. Outside, the wind howls again, rattling the ship's sides. The men finish quickly, wiping their mouths on sleeves or old rags. Some save crumbs and small pouches just in case. Others lick their fingers clean, unwilling to waste even a grain of salt. The cook begins to scrub his pot with sand and seawater, humming the same tune. Historians today still question how pirates managed morale on such meager diets. Some argue that shared meals built unity, a kind of ritual that reminded them they were not alone. Others think the monotony of food worsened discipline, feeding mutiny as much as hunger. Both ideas might be true. The galley was the ship's heart, both comfort and battlefield. You linger for a moment longer. The table is empty now, the plates stacked neatly. The smell of salted beef clings to the air. You glance around and see the faces of men hardened by necessity, their eyes dulled by cold, but still alert. The sea may strip away softness, but it never fully takes the will to live. As you turn to leave, the cook pours the last of the warm water into a small cup and offers it to you. His hand trembles slightly. "For luck," he says. You take it, the warmth seeping into your palms. The taste is plain, just salt and metal, but it feels sacred somehow. On this frozen ship, every bit of heat is a blessing, and every meal, no matter how poor, is a small act of defiance.
You hear it then, a sound. A hollow, mournful clang, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It has a bell buoy, somewhere out in the void, a warning and a mystery. A sailor near you mutters under his breath, a fragment of a prayer you barely catch. Saint Clement, protect us from the depths unseen. His voice is rough, hushed, as if speaking too loudly might draw the attention of whatever lies in the mist. The smell is the first thing that truly roots you here. It is not one smell, but a layered tapestry of life at sea. The sharp, briny tang of the ocean, the rich, oily scent of wool from the cargo below, the pungent, smoky odor of tar used to seal the seams, and beneath it all, a faint, sweet, sour smell of rot, of bilge water, of damp wood that never truly dries. It is the smell of confinement, of a world afloat, cut off from the solidity of land. You walk cautiously toward the ship's rail, one hand trailing along the cold, wet wood to keep your bearings. Leaning over, you peer down. The water below is a dark, swirling mystery, a deeper gray than the fog, the two meeting in a seamless, silent union. The fog seems to be boiling up from the sea itself, a living exhalation. This is where they lived, not the romantic adventurers,
but the practical men, the sons of fishermen and farmers from the coastal villages of Flanders, of England, of the Hanseatic ports. They worked for the merchant guilds, their lives measured in cargo delivered, in coins earned, in returning home alive. The sea serpent was part of the lifeblood of medieval Europe, carrying goods between Bruges and Bergen, Lübeck and London. Out here, the fog wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a navigator's nightmare, a thief of time, a passive, patient enemy. A curious detail from old sailors' manuals comes to mind. In such conditions, men were advised to chew on pieces of salted meat or hardtack, not just for sustenance, but to give their minds a focus, a small, tangible, rhythmic action to combat the formless anxiety. You can almost taste it now, the hard, salty crunch, a stark reality in this featureless world. You step closer to the companionway leading below decks. A sliver of warm yellow light spills out, a promise of a different kind of space. From within, you hear the low murmur of voices, the sound strangely comforting after the silence. That is where the crew retreats, where they try to snatch moments of rest. But rest here is a fragile thing, a state of heightened readiness. It is a negotiation between exhaustion and the primal fear of what you cannot see. The silence outside feels heavier than any storm. You pull your own damp cloak tighter, a futile gesture. Your mind turns to how these men measured safety, not by the absence of danger, but by the presence of familiar sounds, the specific creak of a particular timber, the reliable lap of water against the hull, sounds that this fog had stolen from them. A day where you didn't hear the terrifying crash of breakers on a hidden lee shore was a victory. A morning where the sun finally burned through the gloom felt like a divine pardon. The sea didn't care about their schedules or their cargo manifests. It was vast, ancient, and utterly indifferent, hiding its perils behind this soft, gray, smothering wall.
The man at the wheel is named Bjorn. You don't know this yet, but you feel it in the solid set of his shoulders, the grim patience in his stance. He is the helmsman for this watch, his world shrunk to the compass housed in its wooden binnacle before him. The compass is a simple brass-bound thing, its needle trembling within a pool of oil. It is the one true thing in a directionless universe. North is north, even when you cannot see the stars. His hands, wrapped in strips of old cloth, grip the worn spokes of the ship's wheel. They are not white-knuckled with fear, but hold a steady, practiced tension. Every few seconds, his eyes flick from the fog ahead, a pointless gesture, down to the compass, making a minute adjustment. The ship, Sea Serpent, has a mind of her own, a tendency to fall off the wind, and his job is to argue with her, constantly, silently. You stand near him, feeling the vibration of the ship through the deck. The Sea Serpent moves with a slow, sluggish roll, as if she too is disoriented by the lack of horizon. The sound of the water against the hull is muted, a soft, shushing sound, like a mother quieting a child. It is the only constant rhythm. Another man stands a few feet away, a lookout. But what is there to look out upon? He stares into the whiteness, his head cocked, his entire body an instrument of listening. His name is Finn, a younger man, perhaps 17. You can see the strain in the set of his jaw, the the way his eyes dart at the slightest imagined sound. He is not looking, he is listening, for the cry of a gull that might indicate land, for the snap of a sail on another unseen vessel, for the dreaded low growl of surf on rocks. A fascinating note from a 16th century pilot's guide describes this very practice. In fog, it advised, let the ears become the eyes. Listen for the quality of the silence. A sudden quieting of the waves may speak of a nearby headland. The cry of certain birds carries farther over water than land. These men were reading a map of sound, a chart of echoes and absences. Bjorn, the helmsman, speaks, his voice a low rumble that seems to be absorbed by the fog the moment it leaves his lips. Steady as she goes, he mutters, more to himself than to Finn. It is a mantra, a spell against the void. Finn nods, not taking his eyes, his ears, from the mist. Aye, steady. They do not speak again for a long time. The only sounds are the creak of the wheel, the sigh of the sea, and the occasional soft knock of a loose pulley against the mast. That knock, usually an ignorable part of the ship's symphony, now stands out like a clock ticking in an empty cathedral. It marks the passage of time in this timeless place. You notice a small, almost superstitious ritual. Finn reaches into a pouch at his belt and takes out a smooth, gray stone. He rolls it in his palm for a moment, then puts it back. A luck charm, a piece of home, a tangible piece of the real world. Every man on this ship carried such tokens. A carved piece of bone, a saint's medal rubbed smooth, a lock of hair tied with a string. They were not luxuries, they were anchors for the soul. The fog seems to play a trick. For a moment, you think you hear a voice, a faint call from the port side. Both Bjorn and Finn tense, their heads turning in unison. They listen, frozen. Nothing. The silence returns, heavier than before. It was nothing, or it was something, far away, its source and meaning lost in the distorting blanket of fog. The tension drains from Bjorn's shoulders, but Finn remains rigid, his knuckles white where he grips the railing. This is the true work of the watch, not action, but a relentless, draining vigilance. It is a battle against the mind's own tendency to see shapes in the clouds, to hear voices in the wind. It is the discipline of stillness, of patience. The ship's life and all the lives aboard her depend on this quiet, nerve-wracking attention.
The companionway is a steep, narrow ladder leading down into the ship's belly. You descend carefully, your hands on the cold, wet rails. The transition is immediate. The muted gray light of the deck is replaced by a dim, smoky orange glow. The air changes too. It is thicker, warmer, and laden with a potent mixture of smells. It smells of men, of unwashed bodies and sour breath. It smells of the cargo, the lanolin-rich scent of sheep's wool, the earthy smell of grain in sacks, the faint, sweet aroma of beeswax. It smells of wood smoke from the small, heavily guarded galley fire, and of the damp, fungal odor of the ship's timbers themselves. It is not a pleasant smell, but it is a living one. After the sterile silence of the deck, it feels almost welcoming. This is the 'tween decks, the space between the main deck and the hold below. It is low-ceilinged, forcing you to hunch your shoulders. Massive, curved wooden ribs arch overhead like the bones of a great beast. Hammocks are slung in every available space, a complex web of suspended canvas and rope. Most are occupied. The crew sleeps in shifts, and for now this is the off-watch. The light comes from a few small oil lamps, swinging gently with the ship's motion, casting long dancing shadows that make the sleeping forms seem to move and breathe as one entity. You can hear the symphony of their rest, a chorus of snores, deep and shallow, the rustle of straw-filled mattresses, the soft, unconscious murmurs of men lost in dreams of home, or perhaps nightmares of the deep. You move slowly through the narrow aisle between the hammocks. In one, a man with a face leathered by sun and salt sleeps with his mouth open, one arm dangling towards the floor, his fingers twitching as if still working a rope. In another, a younger boy, no older than 15, is curled into a tight ball, his face pressed into a rough wool blanket. These were the ship's boys, doing the dirtiest jobs, learning the hard way. For them, this cramped, noisy space was bedroom, schoolroom, and refuge. A curious practice, noted in a few surviving ship's logs, was that of the watchcloth. A man on watch would often carry a small, damp piece of cloth. If he heard a suspicious sound, he would hold it to his ear, believing it could help him discern the direction and distance better. It was a mixture of practical acoustics and pure superstition, a testament to the lengths men would go to for a sliver of certainty. You find a small, clear space near the central mast, which descended through this deck like a great tree trunk. You sit on a coil of thick rope, feeling the ship's slow, rhythmic sway. It is a cradle, but a nervous one. Here, the sounds of the sea are different. It is a low, resonant hum that travels through the hull, a vibration you feel in your bones more than hear with your ears. It is the sound of the ocean speaking directly to the ship. You notice the small signs of humanity, of men trying to make this place their own. Initials are carved into a beam. A crude drawing of a woman's face is scratched near a bunk. A small wooden cross is nailed to a post. A seashell, perfectly formed, hangs from a nail by a piece of string. These were not decorations. They were prayers. They were memories. They were promises to return. The air is heavy, and not just with smell. It is heavy with the collective anxiety of 40 men trapped in a wooden shell, adrift in a formless world. They trust their ship. They trust their captain. But the fog is a test of faith. It whispers doubts. It magnifies every groan and creak of the old vessel. One of the sleepers cries out, a short, sharp yell that is quickly swallowed by the ambient noise. He thrashes for a moment in his hammock, then settles, mumbling. No one else stirs. Nightmares were common. The sea invaded dreams, turning solid ground into shifting decks, familiar faces into looming shadows in the mist. For a moment, you close your eyes. The heat, the smell, the sound, the motion, it all blends into a strange hypnotic lullaby. This is how they endured, not by conquering the fog, but by retreating inward into the microcosm of their ship. They made this damp, wooden belly a world unto itself, with its own rhythms, its own rules, its own fragile sense of community. It was a defiance, as quiet
and stubborn as the fog itself.
Aft of the main deck, a single low door leads to the captain's quarters. It is not a grand cabin, but a slightly larger box within the ship's stern. You push the door open and step inside. The space is small, dominated by a wide shuttered window, the stern gallery, that is now closed tight against the fog, droplets of water seeping through the seams. A single lantern, of better quality than those on deck, burns on a heavy, bolted-down table. The room is filled with the smell of lamp oil, old paper, and a faint, lingering scent of wine. Captain Moreau sits at the table. He is a man in his 50s, his hair and beard shot through with gray, his face a road-nap of wrinkles carved by wind and worry. He does not look up as you enter. His focus is entirely on the chart spread before him. It is a thing of beauty and frustration, made of vellum, hand-drawn, with coastlines that bulge and taper in ways that only vaguely resemble reality. The seas are filled with illustrations of sea monsters and curling waves, and the margins are notes in a tight, precise script. His hands resting on the chart are still, but you can see the tension in them. One finger traces a line, a known trade route from London to the Baltic. But where are they on that line? The fog had stolen their celestial navigation for days. Dead reckoning, estimating position by speed and direction, was a guess at best in these conditions. A strong, unknown current could have pushed them miles off course. They could be sailing safely in deep water, or they could be a few heartbeats away from the jagged teeth of a rocky shore. This was the captain's true burden. The weight of the ship, the cargo, the lives of every man aboard rested on his knowledge, his judgment, and a great deal of luck. He was not just a sailor. He was a navigator, a businessman, a diplomat, and a father to his crew. The isolation of command was absolute, especially here, in this silent gray prison. On the table, next to the chart, lies a worn Bible, a brass divider for measuring distances, and a half-empty glass of dark wine. There is also a small locked box. You know without being told that it contains the ship's money, the letters of marque, the legal documents that define their voyage. Next to it, within easy reach, lies a heavy pistol, polished but functional. It was not just for enemy ships. Mutiny, born of fear and prolonged stress, was a ghost that haunted every captain. He sighs, a long, weary exhalation, and finally leans back, rubbing his eyes. He looks old in the lamplight. He picks up a small silver locket from the table, opening it to reveal a miniature portrait of a woman with a gentle smile. He looks at it for a long moment, his expression unreadable, then snaps it shut with a sharp click. It is a gesture of love, but also of guilt, the knowledge of what he has left behind and what he might not return to. A curious entry from a captured captain's journal describes this exact feeling. The fog is a thief of time and a breeder of phantoms. In the silence, I hear not the sea, but the voices of all the men I have led into danger, and the silence of the wife who waits, not knowing if the silence from the sea is peace or its final word. He stands and walks to the shuttered window, placing a hand against the cold, damp wood. He is listening, just like the men on deck. He is listening for any change in the sound of the water, for the cry of the lookout, for the one sound that could mean salvation or disaster. He is a man holding his breath. The entire ship is holding its breath with him. In this small, quiet cabin, the tension is a physical thing, as thick and palpable as the fog outside. Here, there are no brave speeches, no dramatic gestures. There is only the crushing weight of responsibility and the patient, desperate hope for a break in the weather. The scent of smoke and cooking leads you forward to the one place on the ship where open flame was a calculated risk, the galley. It is a tiny, soot-blackened hut built on the foredeck, a separate structure to contain any potential fire. You duck inside. The heat is a shock after the pervasive damp. It is close, smoky, and smells of burned porridge, salt pork, and the sharp, clean scent of the vinegar used to scrub the pots. The ship's cook, a massive, silent man named Lars, stirs a large iron pot suspended over a small, sand-filled hearth. The fire is tiny, a cluster of glowing coals, fiercely guarded. One spark could doom them all. This is the heart of the ship in a way the captain's cabin could never be. It is a place of warmth, of sustenance, of small daily rituals. A few off-duty sailors are huddled here, not for the meager food, but for the precious warmth. They hold their hands out towards the feeble heat, their faces gaunt in the flickering light. They say nothing. They simply exist in the shared comfort of the glow. Lars nods at you, a brief, almost imperceptible gesture. He is a man of few words. His world is his pots, his fire, and the relentless battle against spoilage and boredom. The food is a monotonous cycle. Hard-tack biscuits so solid they could break a tooth. Salted beef that needs to be hammered and soaked for hours to be edible. Thin gruel and dried peas. On a good day, there might be a handful of dried fruit or a scoop of molasses to sweeten the deal. This was not a life of culinary delight. It was a battle against scurvy and despair. A fascinating bit of nautical history involves the copper. To create warmth without an open flame, cooks would sometimes heat a cannonball or a large stone in the galley fire, wrap it in thick cloth, and place it in a wooden box. This makeshift heater would then be carried below decks, a fleeting gift of warmth to the men trying to sleep in the damp. You can imagine the reverence with which they would crowd around it, their hands outstretched, chasing the dying embers of heat. One of the sailors, a man with a deeply scarred face, pulls a small wooden flute from inside his tunic. He doesn't play a song, just a few soft, wandering notes, a simple, melancholic melody that seems to blend with the creak of the ship and the hiss of the pot. It is not music for entertainment. It is music for remembering. It is a sound from another world, a world of green fields and solid ground. Lars ladles a portion of the thin stew into a wooden bowl and hands it to you. It is warm in your hands, a small miracle. The broth is salty, with chunks of tough meat and some unidentifiable vegetables. It is not good, but it is hot. It is life. You eat in silence, the other men watching the fog outside the galley door, their eyes distant. This small, smoky space is a fortress against the creeping dread. The warmth of the fire,
the simple act of eating, the shared silence, these are the things that keep the men human. It is a reminder that life, in all its gritty, uncomfortable reality, goes on. The fog may have stolen their world, but it could not steal the need for a warm meal or the comfort of a shared fire. The man with the flute falls silent, tucking the instrument away. The coals in the hearth crackle, a tiny, defiant sound. For a few moments, in the warmth of the galley, the fog feels a little less absolute, the silence a little less profound.
You return to the main deck. The watch has changed. Bjorn has been relieved by another helmsman. Finn is still at his post, but his vigilance is now shared with an older, grizzled sailor named Evans. The fog has not lifted. If anything, it seems thicker, darker, as if evening is falling within its perpetual twilight. And then a new sound begins. It starts as a low, almost subsonic hum, a vibration that seems to come from the water itself. It is not the ship, it is something else. The men on deck freeze, their heads turning, trying to pinpoint the source. The sound grows, morphing into a long, drawn-out, mournful groan. It is the sound of a whale, a great leviathan surfacing somewhere in the mist, its call echoing strangely in the dense air. It sounds close, terrifyingly close. Finn's eyes are wide with a mixture of awe and fear. In the Middle Ages, whales were not just animals, they were monsters, sea beasts from legend. To hear one, unseen in the fog, was to feel the presence of a primordial power. The groan fades, leaving a silence that feels even deeper and more menacing than before. But that is not the only sound. The fog is a master of acoustics. A few minutes later, you hear what sounds like voices, faint, conversational tones, impossible to make out. They seem to be off the starboard bow. Evans cups his hands behind his ears, his whole body rigid with concentration. "Do you hear that?" he whispers. The helmsman nods, his knuckles white on the wheel. They listen. The voices do not come again. Were they the crew of another ship, equally lost? Were they a trick of the wind and water? Or were they something else? The old sailors' tales spoke of ghost ships, of the Flying Dutchman, doomed to sail forever, its crew crying out for a salvation that would never come. In the fog, every superstition felt plausible. Then a new sound, a sharp, rhythmic splashing, like oars dipping into the water. It seems to be circling the ship. Splash, pause, splash, pause. It's too regular to be a fish, too close to be anything good. Evans draws a knife from his belt, his face a mask of grim determination. Finn grabs a belaying pin, a heavy wooden club used to secure ropes. The splashing continues for a minute that feels like an hour, circling, always just beyond the veil of gray. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stops. The silence rushes back in, a physical blow. Nothing. No whale, no voices, no oars, just the fog and the silence and the frantic beating of hearts. The tension on deck is a live wire. The unseen is far more frightening than any visible threat. It is the fear of the imagined, the fear of what the mind can conjure in the absence of fact.
This is the true torment of the fog. It is not just the loss of sight. It is the assault on the senses that remain. It turns the familiar sounds of the sea into threats, and it fills the silence with the phantoms of dread. It forces men to confront not just the dangers of the sea, but the monsters in their own minds.
Night falls, or rather, the gray twilight deepens into a profound pitch blackness. The fog is now a solid wall of ink. The lanterns on deck seem weaker than ever, their light barely illuminating the men standing next to them. The watch is doubled. No one sleeps. How can you sleep when every sound could be the last? The mood below decks is electric with a suppressed panic. The stories of the whale, the voices, the phantom oars have spread through the crew in hushed, exaggerated whispers. Men who were once stoic now have a wildness in their eyes. They clutch their charms tighter. Prayers are muttered not in reverence, but in desperation. The captain walks among them, his presence a calming, if forced, influence. He speaks in a low, steady voice. "Steady, lads. It's the fog playing tricks. We've all heard it before." But his eyes betray his own unease. He has heard it before, yes, but it never gets easier. He knows that a terrified crew is an unpredictable one. In the darkest hour of the night, a new terror arrives. A light, a faint glowing orb seen briefly through the mist off the port side. It is there for a second, then gone. Then it reappears, closer this time. It seems to bob and weave, a will-o'-the-wisp of the sea. "The corpse candle!" someone gasps from the deck. It is an old maritime legend, a phosphorescent light said to appear over the water, an omen of death, a spirit coming to claim a soul. Panic is a hair's trigger away. You can feel it, a collective intake of breath held for too long. The men are at the breaking point. The endless, formless anxiety has worn them down, and this spectral light is the final straw. It is the boatswain, a man named Carrick, who acts. He is a veteran of 100 voyages, his face a mask of scars and resolve. He steps into the center of the main deck, and he begins to sing. His voice is not beautiful. It is rough, gravelly, and loud, a deliberate violation of the oppressive silence. It is a shanty, a work song with a strong, simple, rhythmic beat. What do you do with a drunken sailor? What do you do with a drunken sailor? What do you do with a drunken sailor early in the morning? For a moment, nothing. Then another voice joins in, hesitant at first. Then another, and another. Soon a dozen ragged voices are shouting the familiar, vulgar, grounding words into the night. They are not singing for joy. They are singing for sanity. They are using the sound of their own voices to build a wall against the fear, to remind themselves that they are alive, that they are a crew, that they are together. The light in the mist flickers and vanishes, as if startled by the noise. The singing continues, growing stronger, more defiant. It is a strange, beautiful, and deeply human moment. In the face of the unknown, they have chosen the one thing they can control, the sound of their own community.
The long night wears on, but the mood has shifted. The panic has been, for now, held at bay. The men are still afraid, but they are afraid together. And sometimes that is enough. It is in the hour before a dawn they cannot see that the first change comes. You are on deck, your body aching with a fatigue that has nothing to do with physical labor. And you feel it, a slight stirring against your cheek, a breath of wind. It is faint, cool, and different. It carries a new smell, not the stale, enclosed smell of the fog, but a clean, sharp, salty freshness. The men feel it too. Heads lift, noses sniff the air. The helmsman feels a slight pressure on the sails, a gentle tug that hasn't been there for days. The ship gives a soft, almost eager creak. Then a sound they had almost forgotten. The cry of a gull. Clear, sharp, and undeniably real. It comes from the port side, and this time there is no distortion. It is the sound of life, of a world beyond their gray prison. The fog is still thick, but it is no longer static. It begins to move, swirling in the nascent breeze. Patches of slightly lighter gray appear overhead. The men watch, hardly daring to breathe, as the world begins to reassemble itself around them. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the fog starts to thin. It pulls apart in ragged streamers. For the first time in days, you see a shape that is not the ship, the dark, vague outline of the upper part of the mainsail. Then a patch of sky, a pale, watery blue, appears directly above. A weak, filtered sunlight touches the deck, making the wet wood gleam. A cheer goes up, ragged but heartfelt. It is not a roar of triumph, but a sigh of profound, bone-deep relief. Men are slapping each other on the back, their faces breaking into weary smiles. The tension that had held the ship in its grip for so long shatters like glass. Within an hour, the fog is gone. It retreats to the horizon, a distant gray wall, leaving behind a calm, gray sea under a high, overcast sky. The world is vast again. The horizon is a clean, sharp line. They can see for miles in every direction. There is no land in sight, but that doesn't matter. They can see. They are free. The transformation on the ship is immediate. The silence is broken by the normal, busy sounds of shipboard life. Men are aloft, checking the rigging, shaking out the sails to dry. The cook is banging his pots with renewed vigor. The captain is on the quarterdeck, taking sightings with his astrolabe, a look of fierce concentration on his face as he works to fix their position. The fear, the ghosts, the phantoms, they melt away in the clear, honest light of day. The ordeal is over.
The sea serpent is a different ship now. She is no longer a haunted, drifting coffin, but a living vessel with a purpose. The wind fills her sails, and she leans into it, cutting through the waves with a steady, confident motion. The sound of the water against her hull is no longer a muffled sigh, but a lively, rushing song. The crew works with an energy that was absent before. They are no longer just waiting, they are doing. They are scrubbing the decks, mending ropes, talking and laughing with an ease that seemed impossible just hours ago. The shared trauma of the fog has bonded them. They are not just a crew, they are survivors. You walk the deck, feeling the sun, weak as it is, on your face. It feels like a blessing. You look out at the endless open sea. It is no longer a threatening void, but a pathway, a road home. 2 days later, a cry comes from the crow's nest. "Land! Land ho! Off the starboard bow!" It is the coast of Norway, a dark green smudge on the horizon. The sight is met with more cheers, but these are different, filled with hope and anticipation. They have made it. They have navigated the silence and found their way. As the ship approaches the bustling port of Bergen, the world comes alive with a riot of sounds and smells that are almost overwhelming after the sensory deprivation of the fog. The cries of thousands of gulls, the shouts of fishermen in their small boats, the smell of wood smoke from the town, the rich, pungent odor of fish and tar and cooking food. It is loud, chaotic, and beautiful. The sea serpent glides into her berth, her journey over. The ropes are made fast. The gangplank is lowered. The crew, their ordeal behind them, now become simple men again, thinking of warm food, a soft bed, and the wages in their pockets. The ghosts of the fog are forgotten, left behind in the vastness of the sea. You stand on the dock, watching the crew disperse into the noisy, vibrant life of the port. The journey is over. The story is told. But the memory of the fog remains. It is not a memory of fear, but of something else. A memory of the profound silence of the world, a silence we have forgotten. A memory of the patience and resilience of ordinary men facing the extraordinary. A memory of the small, fragile communities we build to keep the darkness at bay. The sea is calm. The gulls wheel overhead. The sea serpent rests, waiting for her next cargo, her next crew, her next journey. And as you stand there, the sounds of the modern world begin to filter back in. The distant hum of an engine, the rustle of leaves in the wind outside your window. The journey is over, but the memory of the mist and the men who sailed through it remains, a testament to the quiet courage that exists not in the dramatic battles, but in the patient, endless wait for the sun to break through. Thank you for sailing with us. Sleep well.